Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of 10 for the Chairman. This is where I take 10 questions from our subscribers and answer them to the best of our ability. Our subscribers are the subset of our community that contribute extra money every month to allow us to do enhanced community content. So there's the show that I'm doing where I answer the 10 questions, Around the Verse, Meet the Devs, sort of some of the inside CIG pieces we do, and also Jump Point, which is a monthly magazine that has 50 to 70 pages of sort of in-depth behind-the-scenes material. So, thank you very much to subscribers to allow us to sort of do all the enhanced community content we do, because I think that's one of the things that really sets us apart. And your guys' contribution pays for the people behind the camera and people to write posts and do all that kind of stuff, or collate and get together all the images and data, which actually takes quite a lot of time to organize and do and extract from the various busy members of the development team. So thank you for enabling that. So just before I start with the 10 questions, I was just signing some more cards for folks, but we got this in, which was really very cool. It's from Sun, Systems United Navy, and they basically created, look at that, that's awesome, a Systems United Navy Consolidated Operations Codex, which is like an operations manual for various things inside the world of Star Citizen. It's beautifully printed, and then it's kind of hard for me to potentially show you guys, but I don't know if you can sort of see from here. Probably we'll do like a close insert, but I mean the level of detail that's been put in here, star system maps, looking at the different ships, cutouts, stats, it's brilliant. I mean, this is fantastic. In fact, having this inside a game would be amazing, or just getting it as a book. So it's beautiful. So I am constantly amazed at the level of enthusiasm, the skill, the talent. How much people are sort of really invested themselves in the world we're building together, I'm flabbergasted. I mean, I think you guys saw last week we had the wonderful World of Star Citizen, which was sort of our new debut, sort of community focus show, looking at stuff that the community's generated, and there's some incredible machinima in there where. Like Fiendish Feather does some amazing stuff, Years 100, and a bunch of other folks, and you guys, it's amazing. It's just so wonderful to see this world and universe sort of take root in everybody's imagination and what everyone can contribute. And on the team side, it completely inspires us as well. So sometimes we see stuff you guys go, yeah, that would be, yeah, we can definitely do that in the game. We can do this, and so anyway, it's fun. So you guys are doing great stuff. So anyway. That's it. So I'm super impressed with that. Awesome work, and let's get to the 10 questions. Okay, so the first question comes from Harper, who asks, will player organizations be able to recruit NPCs into their ranks? If not, what other mechanics might be put in place to allow organizations without 24-hour activity to protect organization-focused content like capturable space stations and capital ships? Well, so the concept that we're going to have with NPCs is you absolutely can hire NPCs to do jobs for you. So it's not so much that player organizations will recruit NPCs, but they definitely will have the ability to hire NPCs. So the organization could be able to hire NPCs, and individual players can hire NPCs to fulfill roles, whether it's on a spaceship or standing guard, over your asteroid base, or other kind of roles. So there's definitely going to be a fair amount of NPCs. Actually, I was just looking at we were doing some stuff for Squadron 42 and the Idris that you're on, which it doesn't really feel even like a frigate anymore. It's massive, but I think we had 71 NPCs in this sort of in what we're calling the interstitial, which is basically when you're aboard the ship, running around between sort of the combat stuff. There's still loads of stuff to do: go around, talk, hang out with people, develop relationships, and I think we had 71. NPCs in the ship to sort of fill it out, where it sort of felt like, that was potentially a good crew. So my suspicion is, we still got some issues on the rendering side, but my suspicion is that we will probably always, beyond even the player cap, which because that goes back and forth over the network and whatever, we're going to be kept on that sort of lower, then we'll be able to have the total number of sort of people running around, including NPCs and players. So there'll probably always be a balance of NPCs as well as players, and so therefore, if you've got a bigger ship, even if you've got 8 of your friends and you're all on on an Idris, you're probably going to have some NPCs also that you've hired that would be there as security or running a few of the other roles as well. So anyway, that's a sort of long answer to the organization recruiting NPCs. So there we go. Okay, next question comes from Syget, or Syjet, I don't know how you would pronounce it, who says, will we see Vandal pirate NPCs use different types of loadouts, such as stealth, bomber, etc.? Yes, absolutely. So, Vandal, pirates, general people use different equipment, different loadouts, so some people would, have sort of the stealth, the recon setup. Some people would, have sort of the brawler setup. Some people would have the sort of nimble and fast kind of setup. And definitely on Vandals, we've got, light fighters, bombers, sort of the medium fighter, which you've seen, which is a scythe, but there's a whole selection, not any different than was in Wing Commander with the Karathi. So there'll be plenty of variety, and it'll be very cool. I mean, I think you guys are going to like Squadron 42 stuff. That is like its own AAA, massive title. So it's going to be good, and we're ramping up for that this year. So starting April, we're going to be doing the performance capture, and before that, motion capture. And anyway, we're in production on a bunch of stuff, and it's looking really cool. All right, next question comes from Commissar, who asks, can I fly from a space station in Earth orbit to a space station in lunar orbit without engaging my quantum drive? Or will traveling between such points require the use of quantum drive? That is a good question. The way we're setting up the solar systems is that that's one of the big reasons why we went to large world, is that we're all going to be one sort of contiguous or continuous space. So it's not like separate maps for each one of these sort of local areas. They're like a orbit around Earth or orbit around the moon, but they will be very far apart from each other because obviously scales are pretty big, and even though we're probably not going to be fully realistic size for a solar system, will be some factor of a 10th or 100th or something like that. It'll still be relatively, compared to what you're used to in a game, massive. What would probably happen is if you went to fly just at our normal speeds, which aren't particularly fast, it would take you like days to get to another point of interest. I don't doubt that there will be 1 or 2 diehards that will sort of do that, like the one person that was going across the Minecraft map forever. But generally, you'll want to do quantum drive to get there, because you just don't want to take all the extra time. But the system would handle you just flying and keeping on flying and keeping on flying, and finally getting there, because you were actually all on the same map. And that's why we need the large world. Okay, so Black Eagle asks, what happens if my communication systems and engines are blown up, but the attacker decides to just leave me helpless out in space? Will I be doomed for all eternity to wait for another player to come around and rescue me? Or will there be a mechanic that makes an NPC visit me after 30 minutes of inactivity? Especially out in the sort of persistent universe, we don't want anyone to just be floating out forever, not doing anything stranded. So we'll probably put some mechanics in place that sort of you get auto-rescued after a certain period of time. We don't have a specific timeline for that, but that's part of the thought we've had on the design, is that, yeah, obviously if because it's not so much even your engines are blown up, what if you've ejected and you're floating in space? And so the kind of idea is there's probably some kind of beacon built into your flight suit or whatever, and then there will be people out there that actually like earn money by rescuing people, and so you could be a mission for another player to come and rescue, or another NPC to come and rescue you, and then you get back into the game. All right, next question comes from Spectronic, which I guess is spelled SP3CTREYNC. The Mustang recently saw performance changes in AC 1.0.2. How are these changes achieved in an engine that physically models ship movement? These changes affect maneuverability across other ships. So specifically in the Mustang, I think if we were, I'm not 100% up on exactly what we did on 1.02. I know on 1.1, we've been doing a refactor to a lot of the IFCS and flight control modeling and some of the background mathematical models we're using in terms of like how we're doing our solving to have a more predictable, consistent outcome to the actual physical simulation. So hopefully in 1.1 there should be some more stability on some of the flight issues that you guys have seen recently. That's still a work in progress, so let's touch wood for 1.1, maybe 1.1.1 afterwards, I don't know. But generally before that, if we're doing changes, we're mostly doing things like adjusting thrust on various thrusters, adjusting mass and stuff to try and balance it, because we don't have any sort of per se rule that says, okay, well this ship rolls at this rate or whatever, because everything's physically simulated. So we sort of have to do things like move the position of a thruster around, move the thruster mass, change the actual thrust that it puts out, or change the mass of the ship. So those are the things. And I know that there's been a couple of Mustang issues that we've noticed, like some of the bucking, although I guess that's appropriate for a Mustang to buck. But we've been trying to address those, and you'll see more at 1.1 or 1.1.1, depending on whether it makes it in. But that's something that John Pritchett is working on, as well as the ability to toggle ESP on and off and on, just like we can toggle ComStab and Chief Safe off and on. So there you go. So generally the changes when we do localized stuff for ships don't affect all the ships, just because we're changing stats on the ships, but some of the stuff that we're doing now that John's doing will just make the system inherently more stable and predictable, and that will affect all the ships, and hopefully they should fly a little better and feel a little better. And of course, as people add and change things along the way, sometimes the flight stuff gets a little worse and worse because it's all properly physically modeled, and we have to go back and rebalance things in terms of like weight distribution and mass and stuff like that, just like you would in the real world. Okay, next question comes from Cal Alusis, who asks, is there any plan to allow us to replay Squadron 42 missions in our sim pod? That's a good question. I think we kind of had the idea that you could replay the missions, just like once you played it, you unlocked it, and you can go back and replay the individual missions. Don't know whether it would be from the sim pod, but that's a pretty good idea. So that's a pretty simple answer for that one. Next question comes from Pregnant Bear, who asks, what kind of handheld weapons do you envision besides guns? Can we expect to see swords and hammers? Good question. Well, we're definitely going to have crossbow, because that was something we did with the Shroud of the Avatar, and we've got a pretty cool crossbow design, which I think we've shared with you guys. We are going to have melee, so in the very early stage of the FPS, I think it's just straight up simple random brawling, but the long-term plan for the melee is that you'll have some basic sort of punch or duck kind of moves, but then you can actually go to different places around the universe, and perhaps you can go to a Tavarian dojo, and you can learn some element of a Tavarian martial arts, and then you'll have some extra moves to use, and so you can engage in hand-to-hand combat, and the more moves you use, the more options you have against someone, the more defense you have, the less, and if they haven't had the same level of training, they may have less options to block or defend themselves against you. So it'll be kind of cool. Like if you spend a bit of time, you basically pick up some new combat moves around the universe that will do that. So we'll definitely be having that sort of on a kind of melee basis. I think we'll definitely have knives. I don't know so much about sword and hammers. So short term, probably not. Longer term, yeah, why not? I mean, it's not that different than a knife or some of the melee stuff I'm talking about. Not sure that we'd get to the point where you both would have knives and you would have swords and you would fence, but who knows in the long term future. But generally, I would say it would be sort of kind of the melee stuff you would expect in a modern world setting, which would be mostly things like knives and how you fight with your hands, and then obviously guns and things like crossbows and stuff like that. Okay, next question comes from Zipzag, who asks, how are resources going to be handled in the persistent universe? Once a field has been mined, will we have to wait for it to respawn, or will new asteroid fields be created elsewhere in the same system? Yeah, I mean, our plan is that most of the elements around the universe are persistent. So there'll definitely be massive tracts of minerals in asteroid fields, and they can be mined for quite a long time, just like in the real world. But once it's mined out, the idea is its persistence, and you would have to move on to a new one. And we're going to have most systems have lots of opportunities for sort of mineral mining, like asteroid fields, and a lot of the asteroid fields won't even be marked on maps, and so there'll be a whole sort of explorer/prospector career path where you're actually going around, flying around in empty space looking for asteroid fields, and then scanning them to see if they've got minerals, and then maybe laying a claim to a certain area in the asteroid field and going back and filing it in the UE Office of Mineral Rights, or whatever we're calling it in the UE Empire. And so I think what would happen is people move around. Whether or not the various fields regenerate, I think when me and Tony have discussed it right now, we're not planning necessarily on to have that happening. But longer term, we may do, generally just because you don't want to drive everyone out of the center systems after all it's mined out. But we're planning to have quite a lot of resources in everywhere that will be pretty hard for the player base to exhaust, right away or anytime soon. So there you go. So it's mostly find new asteroid fields created elsewhere in the same system. Question from Wildshot is, will scans reveal which pilots are real and which ones are NPCs? That's a good question. I've said before in the past that it would be kind of cool that you didn't necessarily know who an NPC and who a player was from a distance. I definitely think when you get close or you scan, you're going to know, because you sort of the whole idea of like getting a sort of ID, kind of like an identifier number, is to, like the handle is to sort of be able to identify, who that player is. And so, if you get one that's a real player, then it's a real player. And if you get one that isn't a player, you'll know it's an NPC. So I think, scans will reveal which are real and which ones are NPCs, but that would probably be a more sort of in-depth scan, and maybe from the distance you wouldn't necessarily know. Okay, next question, or the last question, comes from JJ Guru, who asks, how is the 64-bit transition progressing? Is it a required change before we see the multi-crew ships in 2.0? Okay, so it's going quite well. We've basically, in fact, when everybody gets 1.1, they will be playing the engine that is mostly in 64-bit. You're not going to appreciate it because it's all still in our old maps, and we haven't, the final element that hasn't been moved across is the rendering side of stuff, which has to go to camera relative. So the rendering, the 3D pipeline is all still going to be in 32-bit, mainly because the GPUs all run in 32-bit. And there's also not much reason to be greater than 32-bit on rendering, because when you're figuring out what's around you that you can actually see, that's perfectly fine inside the 32-bit range. What it is not fine for is a huge solar system that you're going to travel millions of miles across. We've essentially moved everything except for the sound module in CryEngine and the sort of rendering pipeline to 64-bit now. It will be actually in 1.1, so it's kind of part of our sort of regressive testing, I would guess, the way I describe it. So we're in the middle now of doing the camera relative change. And the camera relative change is sort of basically what you do is you take the camera in its sort of global position, 64-bit, any of the elements you're rendering in their global 64-bit positions, and then you figure out the relative distance between them, and that gets turned into a 32-bit number, and that goes through the rendering pipeline. So that's what we're in the process. So we're almost done with it. And like I said, when you guys play 1.1, you'll basically have most of the code running in 64-bit for all the positions and matrices and quats. But it'll just be dealing with areas or ranges inside our current map range, which are designed to work well with the precision of a 32-bit. But you'll mostly be operating on the 64-bit code. It is a required change for the multi-crew ships, mainly just because we've got a bunch of stuff. It's the large world plus the local grid physics stuff that we've sort of demoed a little bit when we did Gamescom last year, and all those sort of come in. We have this thing called the zone system that we're working on that is allowing us to sort of apportion, do a much better job of efficiently organizing and occluding or updating entities, objects, render elements in a sort of sparse area structure. So like typically most FPSs, they use something like an octree, and an octree works really well for something like an FPS level where there's a pretty constant density of objects in a very, and they're all pretty high density, right? You're running around an FPS level, you're not actually moving that fast, so you have objects everywhere, like every single meter and stuff like this. So there's like literally thousands of objects building up the level you're running around, or tens of thousands of objects. But in the case of Star Citizen, we have a very different problem because we've got objects that can be of high density, like a spaceship. And that spaceship can have lots of moving parts and can have people on board it. But then you can have a whole empty area of space with nothing in it. And most of actually space is empty, and then occasionally you can get to a battle where there's a spaceship's firing and firing lots of laser bolts, and so that little area will be fairly dense. Well, Arctree is really inefficient for that sort of difference between sort of a very sparse amount of data and a very dense amount of data. So we've been working on the zone system, which has been led out of our German office, which is essentially staffed with basically quite a lot of the engineers that built the engine we're using in the very original space. So we'll have more to announce down the road, but we basically, we've got some, like legendary, the best people you possibly could hire. And so one of the things we're working on, they're leading up, finishing off the large world, but also the zone system. And the zone system is the thing that will allow us to be much more efficient about updating stuff, so it'll make our rendering more efficient. It will allow us to sort of occlude, okay, here's a big spaceship, I'm outside it, so I'm not in the interior zone, so I don't need to render the interior zone, I don't need to update the interior zone. So in terms of like dealing with these sort of bigger space combats where you can have some big ships like an Idris or even a Bengal, and then smaller ships like the fighters, and then people running around inside the ships and outside, the zone system's really good at sort of being able to break those down into different sort of areas of data density. And so that's kind of what we're working on. And again, the zone system, like I was mentioning you could fly between areas. Well, you could think of like Earth, right? You're in orbit in Earth, that's one zone, and orbit and Moon is another zone. And then between them, there's nothing. And then as you enter the zone, it says, okay, let's stream in the Moon, and let's stream in the space station that's around the Moon, and let's stream in the asteroids that are hanging out here. And then let's stream in the spaceships that are hanging out here. Well, now, of course, also the space station in orbit around the Moon could also be another zone inside. So basically, we stream that, and it comes with its own attached zones inside. And so anyway, it's really good for sort of updating and rendering and sort of occlusion and all the rest of stuff. So basically, the zone system and the 64-bit and the local grid are all things that we really need to have the large ships work efficiently in a place where people can come and go, and we can have lots of stuff happening around. Because I know there's a lot of people have sort of been wondering, well, how you manage to have these big spaceship battles, and it just requires a different approach in how you're going to update and how you're going to render, and how you even communicate on the network, because the zone system also would be used for, so basically the zone system would be used for sort of figuring out what LEDs you're using, what sort of level of network updates you would use, what level of updates you would use, what you see, what you don't see. So it's all those things together, that we're going to have that in the multi-crew ship combat, and then also that's sort of the foundational stuff for the big space flying around over huge distances, going from planet to another planet and all the rest of stuff. And that's in progress, and I think it's going to be pretty good. We're seeing some like really great performance gains going the zone system way as opposed to the traditional Octree rendering system way. So there you go. That's probably more of a technical dump than you guys were expecting, but that's it. And I think we have at the end of this show, we're changing it up a little bit, so we're going to do like a little sneak peek of the Retaliator as an in-engine shot. So enjoy that, and I'll talk to you next week. And I would just like to thank everybody that has backed this game. You're enabling us to build something that is above and beyond what I think anyone else would ever be able to build in the industry. We're building something really special. The stuff that I see that we're working on design and all the rest of stuff, the potential of it, I just think it's going to be it's going to be a great experience. And thank you all for supporting it. Thank you all for being part of it and letting us build this with you. So talk to you next week. Bye. Hey guys, thanks for watching 10 for the Chairman. If you guys would like to see more episodes, go here. If you guys would like to subscribe to our YouTube channel and always keep up to date with all our video content, go here. And if you guys would like to watch episodes of Around the Verse, go here please. And I will see you in the verse.